Want to learn what's new with dental products and services? Come join us. Welcome, everybody, to the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast, where I am sitting down with the amazing people in the industry and having them talk about their companies, their products, their why, their outlook on the future, all kinds of exciting things, and maybe even some things about them that you didn't know. I'm your host, John Stamper, and thanks for joining me. This episode of the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast is brought to you by TSYS, one of the nation's leading providers of payment processing services. Whether you need a secure payment gateway, an easier way to set up payment plans for those patients that want to get the dentistry done but don't always have the funds up front, or a time-saving system to automatically post your credit card payments to your practice management software system at the end of the day, they have it. So it's one thing for me to come on here and list all the things that they do. It's a whole other thing to meet them in person and see it in action. So that's what I did. Got in the car, drove down to Charlotte, North Carolina. I got to spend a couple of days with their leadership team, all of their members that are speaking with dental practices all over the country. I got to listen in on some of the phone calls on some of the things that the dental practices need and really watch how they handle that whole situation. I was really impressed by their vision, but most importantly, how they have taken payment processing and humanized it. So I really encourage you to go check them out and learn more about some of the innovative solutions they are providing in this space. And right now, I'm really excited that for all of my listeners, they are making available a $300 activation credit to anybody that signs up for their service. Now, this is the equivalent to the cost of the machine for an entire year. One of the things that I also was impressed with is that how many times have you been using a practice management software system and you are using your merchant processing with that, and then you had to switch and you had to use the merchant processing system that came with that practice management software. Doesn't work like that with TSYS, and I think that's what's awesome is they're very, very flexible, and they've built their systems to be able to plug and play with whatever it is that you have in your practice. Another great thing, no contracts. So if you want to take advantage of this awesome activation credit that they're making available, just call 844-545-6255. That's 844-545-6255. They've got a great team there answering questions from dental practices all over the country. Go ahead and let them know that you heard about them on John Stamper's Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast, and they will be sure to answer any questions you have specifically about your payment processing and any and all the needs that you have around that very important part of your business. Be sure to mention the activation credit. And once again, the phone number is 844-545-6255. What's going on, everybody? Happy 2019 and welcome to the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast. I am very excited as I look out towards the first part of this year to bring to you this podcast series in conjunction with Dental Consultant Connection. So towards the end of last year, I got the wonderful opportunity. I was introduced to Robin Morrison, who started Dental Consultant Connection, and we got talking and was learning more about her company and what she does. And it was very fascinating to me that there would be an organization that had pulled together coaches and consultants, all with their own unique expertise and focus, and then have them there and available based on the needs of a dental practice. I love the idea. As so many of you know, the decision to bring somebody into your practice, regardless of what they do, can be a very overwhelming decision. There's a lot of things to think about, and not one person knows anything and everything. And so certainly having the ability to be able to have focused experts in specific needs of your practice really is a cool idea. And so I thought that it would be helpful to bring on each one of the team members from DCC on a weekly basis. And so Robin and I talked about this, and we thought we'd put together a podcast series to get the year started. And the theme is practice strategies for the startup and the season. So what we're going to do is each week we're going to have one of her team members come on. We're going to start with having them come on the DentalCast Productions Facebook page on the I've Got got 10 video podcasts and have them just share 10 minutes worth of a couple of tips for the startup practice and or the seasoned practice. And then we'll have them come here on the Digital Trade Show Dental Audio podcast and have them share a little bit more about themselves, their story. As many of you know, that is something I'm very, very passionate about. I love people's stories. I think it is the one thing sometimes that is the difference between any consumer making a decision on what they choose to purchase, is knowing a little bit more about that person. And certainly if we can do that and we can showcase so many of the great personalities and people in dentistry and have them come on and share their story, it makes it a little bit easier when it comes to making that decision on the product or service that you want to purchase. So I am very excited, as we said, to get this thing started. Robin was very gracious to have one of her team members come on once a week, and we're looking forward to where this goes, but more importantly, providing great content for you, the dental professional, that you can take a couple tips here, a couple tips there, apply in your practice, but more importantly, if you want to take advantage of some of these great resources that Robin has available and the people that she's working with at DCC, would love to have you reach out to dentalconsultantconnection.com. Learn more about them, learn more about the great consultants, and I will certainly do my best here on a weekly basis to showcase their talents, learn more about their stories, and most importantly, always try to provide great content for you as you listen in your busy schedule. So, without a further ado, here is this week's episode, Practice Strategies for the Startup and the Seasoned. All right, everybody, we're going to get into the podcast today with my guest, Dianne Watterson. Very excited as we continue our Dental Consultant Connection podcast series here on the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast, where we're bringing on individuals in the industry that are doing amazing things, are offering products and services, and certainly a lot of the team members from DCC are out there consulting, educating, leading on the specific topic that they're passionate about. And today, we're going to talk hygiene. I'm really, really excited. We're going to talk assisted hygiene, and we're going to talk with Dianne Watterson, who has done some amazing things in the industry, is very, very passionate about it, which you're going to hear as we get started. And before she shares her story, I just wanted to highlight some of the things. She has done so much to really set the stage here, but she has more than 4 decades in dentistry. Her business, Watterson Speaking Consulting, is based in Lexington, North Carolina. And since 1997, she has been published extensively, including authoring 2 monthly columns in national dental publications, one in Dental Economics, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, called Practice Wisdom, and the other in RDH, called Staff RX. Dianne is a well-known provider of continuing education for dental professionals and has presented for associates and major dental meetings across the U.S. Now, in addition to serving on the editorial board of RDH Magazine, she is a co-author of Foundations of Periodontics for the Dental Hygienist, a text that is used in many hygiene programs. She has published 3 books, Manage Your Practice Well, The Consumer Dental Hygienist, and Real World Dental Hygiene, which won an Apex Award for publication excellence. And she was honored by Dent Supply as a distinguished dental professional in 2005. She was also honored by Colgate in 2009 and 2010 as a key opinion leader and serves on their Oral Health Advisory Board. She's been chosen as a leader in consulting speaking by Dentistry Today every year since 2006, which is amazing. And in addition to being a former faculty member of the dental hygiene program at Guilford Technical Community College, she is a member of Christian Medical Dental Association, American Association of Dental Office Managers, American Academy of Dental Hygiene, and American Dental Hygienists Association. Dianne and her husband, Dave, live in Lexington, North Carolina, and have 4 grown sons and 7 grandchildren. Welcome to the podcast, Dianne. How are you doing?
Thank you, John. I'm great, and I'm so glad to be here today to participate in this podcast with you and share a few things with listeners that I think might be helpful.
Yeah, I love that, and thank you for sending over what you've done. It's always really cool from this side of the microphone. To a lot of times people read bios, but it's not often that we get to hear the work that is being done by you in the industry. So thanks for that. And now what I'd love to do is have you share your story a little bit about this journey that you've been on in dentistry and how it's got you to where you are today, where certainly you're speaking and consulting and helping professionals all over the industry. But we'd love to have you share that.
Well, I feel particularly blessed to have gone down this road in dentistry ever since 1972, when I first got out of high school, I was hired for a receptionist job in a dental office. And I'll never forget the dentist who hired me said, "I think you're a little young for this job, but your high school principal gave you such a good recommendation. I'm going to give you a chance." And the lady that was there, that was leaving, was a very seasoned dental professional, and she had 2 weeks to teach me everything I needed to know about how to run that front desk in that dental practice, which was a gargantuan task, but I'm a pretty quick learner as well. So anyway, I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes, but you know, back in that day, we didn't have dental insurance to deal with, and our office was totally fee-for-service. We did offer a payment plan to patients, and I had to learn all that. And I did everything at the front desk. I mean everything. It was just me up there, one dentist, one hygienist, and one chairside assistant. Well, about 2 years into that job, one day our lone chairside assistant went to lunch and never came back, ever. And so the doctor had 2 crown preps that afternoon, and the hygienist had a full schedule, and he said, "Well, Diane, I reckon you'll just have to help me." And I had never even held a suction in my hand before. I knew nothing about the back, but he was a very good teacher, and he taught me to chairside assist. And I found through that experience I really loved the clinical part. So that started me thinking about maybe I need to go to hygiene school. And so anyway, I got into hygiene school and finished that in 78. Loved doing dental hygiene. Loved breaking off that big chunk of calculus and seeing that pristine tooth underneath that, and just loved taking patients from a state of disease to a state of good health through a series of appointments. So did hygiene for a number of years, and then kind of got the itch. I think I just wanted to grow. And, you know, when you're a dental hygienist, there's not a lot more you can do unless you want to go to dental school. And I did not want to go to dental school. So I thought if I'm ever going to do anything in another area where I can stay in dentistry but do something else, I need more education. So I applied to a program, got accepted. I wanted some formal business education. One thing that really influenced me was a doctor that I worked with hired a consultant, and she came into our practice, and she really, really helped our practice. And I'd never heard of such a thing or knew that they even existed, but it influenced me quite a bit. And so I decided if I was going to get into consulting work, I needed some formal business education. So I finished my bachelor's in human service management, and I had to do an internship at the end of that. I did a big part of my internship with Linda Miles, and she's one of my best friends in the profession. I've learned much from her, and she and I are close friends today. So, but anyway, at the end of that, I started out, she said, "Now you need to be published." And I said, "Well, what do I write about?" And she said, "Well, write about what you're passionate about." So the first article I ever had published was in 1997 in Dental Economics, and it was on how to be a great boss. Because I had worked with, doctors that were okay, and I'd worked with a couple of doctors that were very difficult to work with. And I'd worked with one doctor that I thought he literally walked on water. I loved him so much. And I knew how that affected me and my work. So I had submitted, 3 or 4 things to Dental Economics, and this was the first one they took. So after that, I submitted something to RDH magazine, and they published that. And that kind of got the ball. Once you get the eye of the editor, then I think it's a little easier to get the second and the third and the fourth article and so on and so forth. So anyway, I started a column for RDH magazine in 98. And so I have been published every month since then, either in my column or I've written many feature articles as well. I found I love to write. It's, every piece I create is like I've given birth. These are all my babies. And and dental economics, currently, I've written for them many articles over the years, but I currently write a bi-monthly article for them on practice management. And I continue to write my monthly article for RDH, which is hygienists from all over the country send me their dilemmas. What is, and some of them are quite serious. Some of them I cannot write about because they're just too serious, right, or too personal. And some are make really good fodder for a column. So it causes me to stretches me. I have to do some research. I know lots of people in the profession. So I feel very blessed. I did go back to school and get my master's in business, so I have my MBA. And I don't think that necessarily makes me a better consultant or speaker, but it gives me credibility. And I tell anybody that wants to get into consulting and speaking get all the education you can get, because people aren't going to hire you if you don't have credibility in the profession. And that's the hardest thing about breaking into this. It took me about 5 years before I could do this full time. So I started my business in 97 and I really went full time in 2002. So in the midst of that 2001, my husband dropped dead of a massive heart attack. And that really rocked my world. And so I had to put things in perspective and make up my mind that I can do this and quit playing around. So I got really serious about my business in 2002. And it's all been good. It's been great since that time. I've never looked back. I just have enjoyed this journey, and now 47 years later, can you believe that, John? 47 years I have been in this business in dentistry. It's been very, very good.
I was, well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I love listening to that. And again, it's interesting when you begin the podcast with the wonderful accolades that you have accomplished, and then you kind of retrace like how it all started. It's so fun to listen to. But when you're talking about 47 years, I'm sure when you hear it right at the beginning, to be in the dentistry for 4 decades. And the other thing that really strikes me, Dianne, is being a writer for a good portion of that. I can only imagine, from your vantage point, what it has been like, over the years and the changes in dentistry. And it's also interesting to me that to hear you say that there was a time, and I know it's hard for people to wrap their head around this, that a lot of practices were fee for service. And then we went into this insurance world, and it kind of seems like that pendulum is, slowly swinging back the other way, which I think from your vantage point, I'm sure is very interesting to watch. So, but thank you for sharing that. That was wonderful.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. No, please go ahead.
No, I just want to say, related to what you just said, that I do agree with you that I think the pendulum is sort of swinging back now to more fee-for-service. But I think the discount dentistry has made some cuts, literally, into dentistry, and we've got some scars now we have to deal with. But all the same, I think the main thing is we've got to do good dentistry for people. We've got to build our practices, and that involves good customer service and hiring people that can do the job well. There are lots of facets to this, but just doing the right thing for patients.
Yeah, no question. And that is a great segue, Dianne, into what we're going to talk about today, which I know you're very passionate about it, and I feel the same way in the sense that hygiene is where it all begins. Really, really, really is where it all begins. And very rarely would you see, unless it's an extremely unique practice, where a very successful, thriving practice, a lot of patients, moving closer to optimal dental health, where you do not see a strong hygiene team. And so I know that's what we want to talk about today, and it's what you focus on, which is assisted hygiene. So, as we get into that, like with a lot of these things, maybe we start with some misconceptions, right, about what is assisted hygiene and or what people think about it.
Well, assisted hygiene is not this thing called accelerated hygiene that I hear people bandy about that term. I really detest that term, accelerated hygiene. Conjures up some very unpleasant thoughts in the mind of a dental hygienist especially. But what it is, it's better use of time. It's 4 hands when 4 hands are needed. It is far better productivity. And it is less fighting the clock. Now, one thing for me as a practicing dental hygienist, that one of the most stressful parts of my day would be when I finish my patient. Now it's this wait. Now, I've got to wait before I can dismiss this patient. I got to wait for the doctor to come and check my patient. Well, over the years working with lots of different doctors, some doctors would come within 5 or 10 minutes, and some would keep you waiting, oh my gosh, 20, 25 minutes. I'm pacing the hallway, wringing my hands, saying, oh my gosh, my next patient's already here. I haven't even cleaned this room up yet. And it's stressful. So if I ask 10 hygienists today, what is the most stressful part of your day? I'll bet you 8 of those hygienists would say waiting for the doctor to come do the exam. And so with assisted hygiene, you get rid of that. You don't wait for the doctor to come. You go on to your next patient and get started, and the assistant waits for the doctor to come do the exam. So that's one of the most beautiful things about assisted hygiene. You get rid of that standing around waiting for the doctor to come and check your patient. You just move on to the next patient. So it's a far better use of time. It's less fighting the clock in general, all those things.
Yep. Well, and so why do you think with the teams that you work with, the people you speak to, that it can be difficult for a lot of these practices to build that into what they do? I'm very curious on what are some of the reasons you hear. Like maybe they hear you speak, like, what, I get it. That totally resonates with me, Dianne. But right, but what follows the but in a lot of cases with people that you speak with as far as why they don't build this into their practice?
Well, there have been some stories floating around in some of the hygiene forums on Facebook. I've read some of the stories that some hygienists tell, these nightmarish types of stories about they tried to implement assisted hygiene and it was a disaster. And most of the time, those kinds of stories are related to overbooking the schedule. I had a hygienist come to me, or call me actually, I don't know, 6 months ago, I guess it was, and she said to me, Dianne, I feel like I'm ready to just get out of hygiene completely. She said, our office went to this assisted model, and she said, it is literally killing me. And I said, when I hear stories like that, first of all, I think, well, have you got a good assistant? Maybe the assistant is not doing her job. But the first thing I think of is the schedule. And I said to her, well, how many patients are they booking you with per day? She said, they're giving me 10 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon. And I thought, oh my gosh, is this a 12-hour day, or what? What is this a 10-hour day? What? And she said, no, it's an 8 to 5 day. She said they're putting people in there every 30 minutes, and it's killing me. I said, I can certainly understand that. And I said, that is unreasonable. It is wrong. There's no way you can keep the quality good trying to pack people in like that. And the people who suffer are the patients. They're right. Just being run through like a cattle drive. That is wrong, and that is not what I espouse. I want the assisted model to be set up correctly so you don't run into that kind of business. I would never work in an office like that. If my doctor expected me to see patients every 30 minutes by myself or even with an assistant, no, I wouldn't stay in that.
Yeah. I think that's the reason why individuals like yourself that are out there, teaching and educating and writing, that it is so important that when somebody hears something, and we all live in this social media world now where we can ask a question and we can get 15 responses in like 7 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Which is nice sometimes, right? Like, somebody goes somewhere, they hear from one of their hygiene colleagues that someone's going to try assisted hygiene. And then it's kind of like, someone going to a forum to ask if they're getting ready to buy a TV and what they think about it. And then you have all these responses. And I can only imagine from your point, sitting back and seeing some of that, because nothing, as you know, Dianne, after all of these years in dentistry, nothing is easy. Nothing, that is worth anything comes without planning. And like you said, really implementing it the right way. And that can be dangerous and really defeats the purpose of what it's all about. So I think that I'm glad that you bring that up, because what you don't want to do is, I'm sure, is to people to not try something or build something that can be very beneficial without understanding everything that goes with it.
Absolutely true. I know that another negative that I have heard or read on some of the forums and all is that hygienists felt like they were just physically, they could not handle the assisted model, that it was too hard on their hand and their back and their neck and all those things. I've read many of those accounts. Well, I say to hygienists that have neck trouble and back trouble, you can certainly see your share of that in solo hygiene, and people have to work ergonomically. They have to learn how to work so they're not in pain. You can get musculoskeletal things in any form of dental hygiene. So if they're having these problems, I would say they need to check how they're working, make sure they're working correctly and not ruining their bodies by the work they do. That's another big negative. I worked with an office in New York one time that wanted to implement assisted hygiene. And there was a lady at the front desk who had been there more than 25 years, and she just dug her heels in. She said, "This will not work for our practice." And I said, "Why don't you think this will work?" And she said, "Our patients won't like this." And so she was one of these people. She was dead set against it. The hygienist was all for it. The doctor hired me to come and help them implement this model. And so I finally told this doctor, I said, "Look, I think this woman at the front desk thinks this is going to be more work for her. I think she thinks it's going to be harder to schedule and have to have more patients in the schedule and all that." I said, "I think you need to have a talk with her and you tell her you are a very integral part of my practice success here, and I want you to understand something. We're going to do this with or without your help, and I want it to be with your help. So I want you to tell me, can you get on board with us and help us here or not? And let her make the decision." I said, you just don't allow staff members to make important management decisions like this. It's the doctor's decision. So I have seen that happen before, where a front desk person just, dug her heels in. This is not going to work. So there's some things that can happen like that. But John, can we talk about some of the disadvantages of solo hygiene?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Well, one of the big disadvantages, I think the number one disadvantage of solo hygiene, is that periodontal charting is often delayed or it's not done at all. And I know it's the truth. I did solo hygiene, and if I was a little pressed for time, I had to cut corners. I would cut in the periodontal charting or in home care instructions, because those two things were easy to cut corners on. And so it's not that I didn't probe at all, but I would just stick my probe in there and check some places, and then I would write in the chart PEP, which stands for periodontal probing, WNL, within normal limits, which some people say, well, that really means we never looked, But all the same, I knew that periodontal charting was going to take me 10 or 15 minutes to do, and I just didn't have 10 or 15 minutes to spend on that. So I would just do a little spot probing and call it a day. Well, I was missing lots of perio, like all these other hygienists miss perio sometimes. They just don't find it because, listen, here's the bottom line. A hygienist will not find what they're not looking for. So they have to be looking for it, and they have to do these all-important periodontal probings and recordings. It's a liability issue for the doctor. And I tell hygienists all the time, doctors expect you to find it. If it's there, they want you to find it and call it to their attention so the doctor can make a decision. Does this patient need to go on and see a periodontist, or can we treat this here? So if I needed to do a periodontal charting, I might go to the front desk and ask one of those girls, can you please help me for about 5 minutes here? Well, you get the rolling of the eyes, you got to pull somebody away from their job to help you. It's just a pain. Well, if you're doing assisted hygiene, you've got somebody at your disposal with every single patient to help you get that charting done. Hygienists will start finding all kinds of perio they didn't even know was there. And it's easy because you've got an assistant. So that's the number one biggest disadvantage with solo hygiene is this periodontal charting. Another big disadvantage is a hygienist will spend copious amounts of time in non-productive activities. Now, these are necessary activities, but they are non-productive, such as operatory teardown and setup, making the patient's next appointment, resetting or doing sterilization duties, all those kinds of things, dismissing the patient. There's all these things take time. Every single one of them take time, and that can all be delegated to a qualified assistant. So that's a disadvantage of solo hygiene is this spending these copious amounts of time in these non-productive but necessary activities. Another disadvantage of solo hygiene is that just having one column to work with in the schedule is quite restrictive. You have a lot more flexibility and opportunities, appointment opportunities, when you have two rooms to work with. So having the two rooms gives you greater flexibility. Another disadvantage, I've already alluded to this one, is in solo hygiene is that other staff members are interrupted when another set of hands is needed. I often needed another set of hands when I did sealants because we had to keep that field dry, and you needed somebody to help you help keep the field dry. So again, you've got to pull somebody else away from their job to help you. You've got to beg somebody to help you often. And then a final huge disadvantage of solo hygiene is that hygienists are forced to waste time waiting for the doctor to come and perform the exam. Now, this is no indictment on our good doctors out there, but I'm telling you, in some offices, it's extreme. I've seen some hygienists get behind a full patient just because of having to wait for the doctor to come check. Now, that is stressful. Now, that is highly stressful, and so that's a big disadvantage of solo hygiene.
Yeah, and it's so interesting for me to hear you lay those out one by one again, and going back to the comment that you mentioned with the office manager in the front, and then just the initial assumption that we're not going to do this, our patients aren't going to like this. And, it's one of the things, Dianne, I think over time, dentistry is such a caring profession, as you know, and I equate it a lot of times to my kids, right? We love our kids more than life itself, but that doesn't always mean that sometimes we care for them too much. And so it's like, it's hard to get into that mode of making recommendations for them that we know they're not always going to like at that moment, but we know, big picture is going to be better for them. And, and you see that a lot, right? And it's easy to fall back into owning the patient's decision, or owning the patient's scheduling, or, God forbid, owning, their thoughts on money, which happens all the time in a dental practice, which we know shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so, to hear you share those, I think is very, very important. And hopefully by people addressing and being true to those things you bring up, I would imagine that's where everything gets started, right? That's where people the light bulb goes off and they start to realize, okay, maybe those are some things we weren't taking into consideration. And that gets the ball moving down the field to at least start talking about assisted hygiene.
Yes, indeed, it does. I know that there are a number of prerequisites that have to be in place before the model can be implemented as well, such as doctor has to have 2 mirrored hygiene operatories that are fully equipped and stocked. I consulted in an office where the doctor only had one power scaler. And so he said, I said, well, how are you going to deal with that? He said, well, we're going to put it on a rolling cart and we'll just roll it between the 2 rooms. And I said, doctor, please, can you just buy another power scaler so both rooms will have one? I said, you're going to have a hygienist in tears at the end of the day if you don't have one of those power scalers in each operatory. You have to be willing to stock the rooms and make them mirrored hygiene operatories. And another prerequisite is that the doctor will hire an additional assistant if the doctor doesn't already have somebody there that can be moved into that position of hygiene assistant. So you can't say, well, I've got 2 assistants and we'll just let Amber, she'll help both of us. She'll come over here and help us a little bit, but she'll help the hygiene. No, that will not work. So there has to be that dedicated assistant. She cannot leave the hygiene area unless there is a no-show or there's downtime. So you can't be pulling her away to help in other areas. I helped an office in Maryland, and I went down there one day to just check on them and just see how things were going. Well, the hygienist was mad enough she could have bit a nail into. She was so angry. And I walked back to her operatory, and I said, what's the matter? She said, well, do you see my assistant anywhere? I said, no, where is she? She said, oh, she's down the hall pouring up models down there in the lab because they could come and get her and say, hey, we need you to do this and this and this. And so I waited for the doctor to come out of his operatory, and I said, hey, good to see you. I said, can I have just a word with you privately? So we stepped into his office, and I said, what are you doing? I said, you can't do this. You can't be pulling her assistant away from her. I said, how would you like it if the front desk was always coming to get your assistant and say, oh, we need you to file charts, or we need you to answer the phone? How would you like that? He said, well, I wouldn't like it. And I said, well, here's the problem. Your hygienist doesn't like it when her assistant's being pulled away. So these are just things I've seen, and you can't do that. So another prerequisite is that you got to have people at the front that understand how to engineer an assisted schedule. One thing I offer to any of our listeners today, if they would like to see a sample assisted schedule, John, I'm happy to send them one by email. And it just shows it shows 10 minutes of assistant time on the front end of the visit, and then it shows the hygienist's actual wet finger time with the patient, and then it shows assistant time on the tail end of the visit. So many patients are still going to be there an hour. It's just that they're going to have assistant time and hygienist time.
Sure.
Then the schedule needs to be on a 10-minute increment, not 15. So that is a non-negotiable. In my opinion, you need to be on a 10-minute increment schedule. And finally, everybody needs some patience while we're implementing this, that there's a little adjustment period, getting used to it. It's something different. And just exercise some patience in the beginning. If we get through a couple of burps in the schedule, and then we'll be fine. So just a few little prerequisites.
Yeah. So now I am curious with if we could talk about a practice that got over the hump. They saw the benefits of it. They incorporated some of these different things, like you said, they're important. And thank you for sharing that that resource. I think that scheduling piece is a big thing. I'm sure, right? I think people could buy in and they can conceptually understand the value of this until the rubber meets the road and it's Monday morning and you got to build a schedule. And like you said, you have to navigate it like the airport. So I know that's a very crucial part of making something like this work, but would love to have you share an example of a practice that you've worked with that embraced this and really how it transformed their practice. And was anything, kind of off the top of your head that you can think of, an example that you could share with everybody to really highlight? I mean, certainly there's a lot of work that goes into the front end of this to making it work. Nothing that's worth anything, as you know, Dianne, comes without a lot of hard work, but it is nice to hear about what it does to a practice when they really truly embrace this and make it work the way that it needs to.
All right. Well, I'm happy to share one. I have worked with practices all across the country, but one that stands out to me, and one of the more recent ones, was a general practice, one doctor, two hygienists, two full-time hygienists, but they were having a hard time keeping both schedules full. And so when I looked at there's a business concept of demand and capacity. And so I told the doctor, I said, well, what I see here is your perfect opportunity to reduce the schedule to one hygienist using both rooms. Now, I didn't want somebody to just, have to be fired, but this other hygienist, he had one hygienist who was getting ready to get married, and she was moving out of state. So I said, this is perfect. I said, you've got the perfect situation here. You don't even have to fire anybody. So what we will do is combine. You'll have like 1.5 hygienists, which is more in line with his current demand at that time. So I said, you've got two hygiene operatories. They're already equipped, and the demand that you have is really more for 1.5 hygienists. And so what we'll do is you need to hire an assistant that will help your hygienist. Well, so I talked with the hygienist at length. I sat down with her and showed her she had never done assisted hygiene before, and I assured her that she was going to be very happy. She would be less tired at the end of the day than working just solo and not having to fight the clock all day and having some help. I mean, just having some help is a great benefit.
Right.
So this model was very, very successful. The hygienist embraced it, and we hired a nice dental assistant to help her, one that was already radiology certified, so the assistant could take the x-rays for the hygienist. Here's an example. Like, if I'm the hygienist and I've got a patient in my chair, he tells me everything's fine, but when I sit down and I do my tour of the mouth and I notice a tooth with a big crack in it, so I'm thinking, doctor's going to want a PA of that tooth. There needs to be an x-ray of just that tooth. And so if I've got to set the patient up, do all this by myself, I've got to pull out the x-ray head, I've got to get the sensor, I may have to wait on a sensor if somebody else has got them, somebody else is using them. But I need that x-ray before that doctor comes in the room. So I could just, in an assisted model, I could say, as I'm leaving the patient, please get a PA on tooth number 12 before the doctor comes in. So I could delegate that to my assistant and move on to my next patient. So anyway, this particular office did go to assisted hygiene. I worked with the front desk to teach them how to engineer that perfect day in assisted hygiene. The front desk was just really thrilled because they were literally just pulling at straws to try to fill two full-time hygiene schedules. And so you can't just pull patients out of the air. You have to have sufficient patient demand to fill those schedules. So we went from the solo model that year, the year before, the hygiene department had produced around 250,000. And so then when they went to an assisted model, and they were producing, well, that the year's not quite over. I'm talking about the year where we started it to the end, which they'll be into it a full year at the end of April.
Right.
But they have already produced 410,000 in their assisted model, and so I mean there's a huge amount of increase there. So again, I think it's nothing but good, and if it's done right. So That's just one example. I've never seen an office that did it right be unhappy with it once they implemented it. And most offices, once they implement it, the hygienist is pleased to have the help and pleased with the way it works. And the doctor can afford to pay staff members better when there's more money coming in.
Right.
So, that should be some sort of a motivator, right? I mean, doctor can't pay out what doesn't come in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you can really increase the profit margin, I've seen offices go from a hygienist producing around 230,000 in a year to producing 420,000 in a year. That's not easy. I mean, that's not hard to do. That's conservative.
Right.
Especially if this hygienist starts finding a lot more perio, and that gets scheduled for treatment. So it's just, my opinion, it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're not even talking about the additional treatments, like you said, that with a little bit of that extra time and a little bit of that extra help that is there that needs to be done, which gets them on that path to getting even closer to, optimal health. And I love it. I think, and you know this, Dianne, I mean, scaling is hard. Scaling anything is hard. Responsibility comes with that, and it's just tough. And it really is, and I'm sure you see it, and it's very, very, makes you very proud, I'm sure, with the work that you do when you work with these practices, that when they are able to, go through the noise and commit to a plan and make it work, there's no question that the results are on the other side. And I've always felt like, and I realize there's a lot of variables with this, because dentistry is not an easy profession, but if the reason why people are in it, if the true reason why people are in it is to help patients get healthy, then it does seem like that there is this, obligation to figure out a way that, if you can, to become more efficient. And I'm sure, I mean, I can understand it from a hygienist perspective, that all of a sudden the thought of seeing more patients and burning myself out is not, who would want that, like you said?
Exactly.
However, but that's not the case. I think that's what's so great about people like yourself, is that there are resources out there now, everybody. There are people, there are practices that have done this that can help. And as you mentioned, I mean, the financial results are amazing, not to mention the patients, seeing more patients. So I don't know. I mean, all around, just great stuff.
That's right. So if I can just quickly recap the advantages of assisted hygiene. The number one advantage being somebody to help with those periodontal chartings and recordings. And another advantage is, here's one I haven't even mentioned. A hygienist will have assistance with suctioning while she's doing, or he is doing, periodontal root planing and scaling. There's a lot of, when you're using power scalers, there's a lot of water, and with many patients, there's a lot of blood. So if you have an assistant by your side who can keep that water and blood out of the field of vision so you can keep on working, you can easily shave 15, 20 minutes off of a root planing and scaling visit if you have somebody by your side to suction for you. That's a great advantage, and I hadn't even mentioned that one. Another one is, of course, the hygienist not having to wait for the doctor to come and perform the exam. Another is that the hygienist won't spend all this productive time performing setup and cleanup and scheduling patient next visit, all those kinds of things, dismissing patient. Here's another one I haven't mentioned, and that is most offices now are computerized. And so even if they're not, even if they still use paper charts, what I would do while I was seated at chairside with my patient, I would dictate to my assistant what to put in the computer as far as chart notes were concerned. And she would type it in. I would sign off on. I would look at it and make sure everything was as it should be, and then I would sign off on it. But she would help me by, because her hands were clean, she was over there. She could go ahead and type it in the computer in the chart notes, or if it's paper chart, she could write the chart note as I dictated it, and then I would sign off on it. So that was a great help. It saves time. It's just another efficiency.
Yep.
Another advantage of assisted hygiene is you can increase productivity anywhere from 7 to 9 patients a day to 12 to 13 without any problem at all. Mm-hmm. You will have a hygienist who sees more patients and is less tired at the end of the day and less stress. To me, anything we can do to reduce stress in the office and make the workday more pleasurable, that to me, it's definitely worth it. So those are some just kind of in a nutshell, some of the great advantages of moving to an assisted model.
Well, I mean, big kudos to you because, again, I think, taking this flag and being out there and trying to help and share with teams and hygienists and doctors the value of it, like anything that is different is not easy. But you're right. I think that it when you can get through the creating those efficiencies, it really does reduce stress and all of that. So, well, as we wrap, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I've been thinking about this since the beginning when we started. You've been in dentistry for a long time and you've seen a lot of things. Share with everybody, Dianne, what are you most excited about? Like when you look at where dentistry is now, when you look at where it's come from, what are you most excited about when you look forward?
Well, I am excited about some things in hygiene as well. When we talk about working efficiently and being able to help as many patients as we can help. John, you are probably aware dentistry is not inexpensive, and for many people today, dentistry has become kind of a luxury that they can't afford anymore.
Right.
Well, I don't know if it's just a shift over the years. People have expenses that have risen and less discretionary income, so on and so forth. Well, what I see happening in the future is that dental hygienists that I feel are underutilized anyway, I think they're going to be utilized to a greater degree to help people that have needs, dental needs that are not being fulfilled. And I see that as a good thing. Now, when I lived in Maryland, I lived there for 12 years as my husband was finishing his career with IBM. And I volunteered with a group that provided free medical and dental twice a month in my area. This was not with the State Dental Association. This was a Catholic group. And oh my goodness, I did dental assisting in that venue because we only had one chair. We had one volunteer dentist. But I tell you, it changed me, John, when I saw people start lining up on the steps of that church where we did our clinic. They would start lining up at 3:30 in the morning because it was first come, first served. Everybody we saw was in pain. These were people who didn't have any money and sometimes massive dental needs. And in our little volunteer clinic, we could do a lot. We did a lot of extractions. We got people out of pain. We did some fillings, but there was so much more that could have been done if we'd had space and volunteers and so on and so forth. So I hope to see in the future that dental hygienists are going to be used to a greater degree in helping more people who really are desperate for dental care. And it won't be that it's just an unaffordable luxury for a lot of people. That's what I see. And I'm excited about that. I don't mean that dental hygienists are going to be doing things they shouldn't be doing. Of course, they're going to be trained to do the things that will help people, but get people out of pain. Some states are already implementing new models of dental hygiene in their state to help hurting people, and I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, we have found a way to help a lot of people own $1,000 cell phones and find creative ways to help them pay for it. So we should be able to find ways, to your point, to creatively identify ways to be able to help people with exactly what you're talking about. I agree with you. I think that is also something that I am excited about. I think that, and again, this goes back to the wonderful thing about our profession is that the people that are a part of it are such caring people. And I think if we can use that as a fuel to combine with so many of the technologies, I mean, I don't think we've ever been in a greater time in history for entrepreneurship and technology. And technology, as you know, Dianne, is not just the computer. It's new ideas, it's new systems, it's new ways to become efficient, to be able to solve people's problems. And so it is encouraging. And I'm with you. And I think there's certainly there are a lot of people doing that more people need to know about. And you can help just one person become healthy. It's very rewarding. No question.
That's it.
Well, this has been awesome. It's been a true pleasure to spend some time with you and to talk about something I know you're passionate about and me as well. So I've really enjoyed it. And again, for all of you out there, the team that Robin Morrison has put together at the DCC, as we continue to go on this podcast series and I get a chance every week, it's been such a great honor to speak with you guys and really have you share what you do and how you're helping move the industry forward. And this is just another example this week with you, Dianne. So I really appreciate it.
All right. My pleasure, John.
All right. Have a wonderful week.
Yes.
All right. See you. What's going on, everybody? John here. Hope you enjoyed that episode here on the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast. If you liked the content, liked the guest, and you are looking to add another podcast to your mix of podcasts, just seems like they're growing like crazy, right? Would love to have you visit iTunes and or Google Play and subscribe to the Digital Trade Show Dental Podcast. As I add episodes out there, those will come through on your listening device of choice, and would love to have you become a member. So moving forward, want to let everybody know that very excited to announce that I have taken all of my podcasts, Digital Trade Show Dental, Digital Classroom, the video podcast that I do on Facebook, consolidated everything into a brand new company called DentalCast Productions, doing a lot of the podcasts, also going to be doing live event recording, all kinds of fun things. And we've got a new website, dentalcastproductions.com. That's dentalcastproductions.com. Would love to have you visit the site. That's where you can listen to all the podcasts. We're also starting up a new newsletter. I'm going to have a lot of great information and content from my guests, and certainly we will only send you stuff if you choose, but I think you'll like it. I think there are a lot of great things that so many of the great companies in dentistry are doing, and would love to have them bend your ear and or your eyes in a newsletter for a small amount of time during the month to share the great things that they're doing. So go ahead and head out to dentalcastproductions.com. You can subscribe to the newsletter really easy, and we really appreciate it. And as always, if you enjoy the podcast, we'd love to have you share it out to all of your other dental colleagues. It is greatly appreciated. And with that, have a wonderful day.